All the waiters feared the arrogant billionaire boss, until the shy waitress stood her ground. The crystal chandeliers of Le Monastère cast geometric shadows across white tablecloths as the evening service began. In the kitchen, Chef Laurent barked orders while his sous chefs moved in choreographed precision. The restaurant had earned its third Michelin star 2 years ago, and every night was a performance of culinary excellence. Emma Chen tied her apron with trembling fingers. It was her third week at Le Monastère, and she still felt like an imposter among the seasoned staff. The other servers moved with effortless grace, their years of training evident in every gesture. Emma had worked her way up from diners and chain restaurants, and this position felt like stepping into a different world entirely. "Table 7, whispered Marcus, the head waiter, his face pale. "He's here." The entire front-of-house staff seemed to freeze momentarily. Emma watched as practiced smiles became slightly more rigid, movements more careful. She had heard whispers about him since her first day. Alexander Carrington, the billionaire investor who owned a dozen restaurants across the city, though Le Monastère wasn't among them. He came monthly, always alone, always demanding, and always leaving someone in tears. Emma peered around the corner. He sat perfectly upright at table 7, his white shirt crisp despite the late hour, his watch catching the light as he checked it with obvious impatience. His dark hair was slicked back, his jaw set in an expression that suggested the world existed solely to disappoint him. "Who's taking him?" asked Sophie, a server who'd been there 5 years. Marcus looked around desperately. Thomas called in sick. Marie is handling the party of 8. Pierre is still recovering from last month, Pierre himself interrupted, his voice bitter. He sent back the Chateau Margaux because it was room temperature. It was served at exactly 18 degrees Celsius as it should be. Then he complained to management that I didn't know proper wine service. "I'll take him," Emma heard herself say. The words hung in the air. Every face turned toward her with expressions ranging from pity to disbelief. "Emma, you don't understand," Marcus said gently. "This man he's impossible. Last year, he made Isabel cry so hard she quit the industry entirely. He finds fault with everything. The temperature, the presentation, the timing, the angle of the fork. Someone has to serve him," Emma said quietly. "And everyone else here has already suffered enough." What they didn't know was that Emma had grown up with impossible. Her father had been a military colonel who inspected her room with a ruler, who returned meals to the kitchen if they weren't plated to his exact specifications, who believed that discipline meant breaking spirits. She had spent her childhood learning to stand perfectly still while being criticized, to keep her face neutral, to find the quiet strength that lives in the eye of the storm. She picked up a menu and walked to table 7. Alexander Carrington looked up as she approached, his eyes cold and assessing. Emma met his gaze directly. Something she noticed made his eyebrow quirk slightly. "Good evening, sir. My name is Emma, and I'll be serving you tonight. May I start you with some water, or would you prefer to see the wine list first?" "You're new," he said flatly. "Yes, sir, 3 weeks. Then this should be entertaining." His tone dripped with sarcasm. "Bring me the tasting menu, all 7 courses. I'll pair my own wines. I don't trust your sommelier. And I expect each course within exactly 12 minutes of the previous one. Not 11, not 13. 12. Understood, sir. And if the kitchen requires more time to ensure quality?" His eyes narrowed. "Then the kitchen is incompetent. Or," Emma said calmly, "the kitchen is committed to excellence over arbitrary deadlines. I'll communicate your preference to Chef Laurent, but I should inform you that rushing a Michelin-starred kitchen may compromise the very quality you're here to experience." The silence that followed was deafening. In her peripheral vision, Emma could see Marcus frozen mid-step, his face white with horror. Alexander Carrington leaned back in his chair, studying her with new interest. "Are you actually arguing with me?" "No, sir. I'm clarifying expectations so there are no disappointments on either side. Would you like to proceed with the 12-minute intervals, or shall I ask Chef to maintain his usual timing?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. Usual timing. For now. Emma nodded and retreated to place the order. Marcus grabbed her arm the moment she reached the service station. "Are you insane?" he hissed. "You don't contradict him. You don't—" "He's a customer, Marcus. not a deity. Emma's hands were shaking as she entered the order into the system, but her voice remained steady. And if we all keep treating him like his behavior is acceptable, he'll never stop. The first course arrived, a delicate amuse-bouche of foie gras with brioche and fig compote. Emma carried it to table 7 with perfect posture, placing it silently before him. Alexander examined it with the intensity of a jeweler appraising a diamond. He took a bite. Emma waited. "The brioche is slightly over-toasted on the eastern edge," he said. Emma leaned forward slightly to look. "I see what you mean. May I ask if it affects the flavor profile, or is it purely aesthetic?" He blinked, clearly unused to the question. The flavor is acceptable. I'll make a note for the kitchen regardless. Your attention to detail is appreciated." She straightened. "Enjoy your course, sir." She walked away before he could respond, leaving him looking oddly unsettled. The evening progressed in this pattern. For each complaint, and there were many, Emma listened, acknowledged, asked clarifying questions, and remained unflappable. When he criticized the temperature of the consommé, she brought a thermometer and measured it in front of him, showing it was precisely correct. When he claimed the Dover sole was underseasoned, she offered to bring fleur de sel and explained the chef's philosophy of allowing the natural flavors to speak. When he insisted his water glass should never be less than 3/4 full, she refilled it to exactly that level each time without comment. What unsettled Alexander most was that she never seemed afraid. Frustrated, perhaps, tired, certainly, but not afraid. "Why are you working here?" he asked suddenly as she delivered the cheese course. Emma paused. "I'm sorry, sir? This restaurant, why? You're clearly overqualified for simple service. I'm not sure there's such a thing as simple service, sir. And I work here because excellence in any field is worth pursuing, even when dealing with difficult customers." "Especially then," Emma said quietly. "Anyone can be kind when everything is easy." Something shifted in his expression. For just a moment, the armor cracked, and she saw something underneath. Not anger, but exhaustion. The exhaustion of someone who had been disappointed so many times he'd forgotten how to expect anything else. The final course arrived, a delicate millefeuille with vanilla cream and raspberry coulis. Emma placed it carefully and turned to leave. "Wait," Alexander said. She turned back. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the dessert. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, stripped of its usual edge. "I've been coming here for 3 years. Do you know why?" "No, sir." "Because my wife and I celebrated our 10th anniversary here 2 weeks before she was diagnosed. She died 4 years ago." He looked up at Emma, his eyes reflecting the candlelight. "And I keep coming back, trying to recapture that one perfect evening. But nothing is ever right. Nothing is ever the way it was." Emma felt her throat tighten. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down, a violation of every service. "Protocol. I'm deeply sorry for your loss," she said. "But sir, with respect, that evening was perfect because of who you shared it with, not because every element was flawless. And by demanding that impossible perfection, you're not honoring her memory. You're just making sure you'll always be disappointed. She wouldn't want that for you." His eyes glistened. "You don't know what she would want. You're right, I don't. But I know that hurting people who are trying their best to serve you doesn't bring her back. It just spreads the pain." Alexander Carrington sat in silence, staring at Emma with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then, slowly, he picked up his fork and took a bite of the millefeuille. A real bite, not a critical examination. "It's good," he said simply. "Would you tell the chef it's good?" "I will, sir." He pulled out his wallet and placed 5 $100 bills on the table. "That's for you, not because of the service, though it was impeccable, but because you're the first person in 4 years who treated me like a human being instead of a monster or a god." Emma pushed 3 of the bills back. "I'll accept 40%, which is generous for the bill. The rest would make me uncomfortable." To her surprise, he laughed. Actually laughed. "Of course you would." He pocketed the rejected bills and stood, buttoning his jacket. "What's your full name?" "Emma Chen. Emma Chen. I own 12 restaurants in this city. I also sit on the board of 3 others, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows that there's a server at Le Monastère who understands what hospitality actually means." He extended his hand. Thank you for reminding me that not everything has to be a battle. She shook his hand, feeling the weight of the moment. After he left, the entire staff surrounded Emma in stunned silence. Marcus spoke first, his voice awed. He smiled. Alexander Carrington smiled. I've served him 20 times and I didn't know his face could do that. What did you say to? Sophie demanded. Emma untied her apron, suddenly exhausted. I just told him the truth. Sometimes that's all people need, someone willing to be honest instead of just obedient. The next morning, Emma arrived for her shift to find an envelope waiting for her. Inside was a letter on heavy cardstock. Miss Chen, I spoke with the owner of Le Monastère last night. I've recommended you for head server training, with a corresponding raise. Additionally, if you're ever interested in management, my restaurant group is always looking for people who understand that service is about humanity, not servitude. Emma smiled and tucked the letter into her pocket. The shy girl who'd walked into Le Monastère 3 weeks ago had learned something important. True strength isn't about being loud or aggressive. Sometimes it's about standing calmly in the face of a storm and refusing to be blown away. Sometimes courage looks like kindness with a backbone. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is treat everyone, even the monsters, like human beings who might just be carrying invisible wounds.